Hi, thanks for joining us on the Old Ways podcast, our YouTube channel, or if you're watching this early on Patreon, thank you for your support. We appreciate it. I am going to do a roundtable interview with one of our Your Scenario, Your Actual Play teams who took on a scenario, which we'll detail here shortly. So, as we like to say with all of our review scenarios, it's important that you understand that we're trying to be as constructive as possible and give you our real feelings in it. Now, I luckily don't know anything that's happened. I don't know the particulars, which is cool because the cast is going to get to inform me on what happened. But what I would like the cast to do, if they would, is just go through the introduction order and tell folks who you are and the character you played. Just give us their name so we can get into the bits later.
Hi, I'm Nate, your friend Nate on the Discords, and I played Leonie Cash, a senior advisor for trade and diplomatic relations in Central Asia.
Okay.
Hello, I am Rosie, and I played Sylvie Rodamel, a Russian pop star slash actress.
That sounds fun.
Vital Tom, and I played Dario Madavi, who is a yogi and self-help guru.
Couldn't see anything going wrong there.
And I'm T.A. Newman from the Miskatonic Playhouse, and I was playing Michael Pravin, who is the first secretary for consular affairs at the U.S. Embassy in Japan.
As is tradition, of course, I'm going to have to say hello, Newman.
Hello.
And last but certainly not least.
I'm Miranda. I was very brave today, keeping this scenario with this group. So brave. I was very brave.
Fabulous. Okay. So just off the top, I'd like to sit with our keeper for just a second, and I'd like them to give us just a rough name and overview of the scenario that you played through.
Yeah, so this is We Dream of Flying by Jim Phillips. And the premise is that all four, it can accommodate more, 6 people, but are on a flight from LA to Tokyo, and at some point in their flight, everyone disappears because they have found themselves in between the waking world and the dreaming world. And it is about finding out how to navigate that, where they're at, how to navigate that, and how they can maybe get back. And it's super fun because they're interacting with the plane a ton, and the plane's interacting back with them. There is a monstrous threat in it. I'll kind of save that for later, but it's a little bit of a sanity grinder for it. So it's a super fun scenario, I think.
That certainly sounds fun. We like good old sanity grinders. Okay, Nate, I'd like you, as we sort of start off some of the player portion of this, to give me an impression, and the viewers, of course, an impression of the scenario from your player perspective.
So one of the things I liked about it is it felt like a in-between adventure. So it felt like a really good adventure if you were running a campaign, or if you were having investigators going from one place to another, and you actually wanted to have something happen to them during that trip. I mean, it's a single location. It's claustrophobic. You're on a plane for most of it. We Dream of Flying, maybe that's a spoiler, but the flying part is a commercial airline in the modern times. And so I really like that. The professions of all that, I have some thoughts on overall, but the professions I thought were interesting in that they were very detailed. They were very almost corporate professional in a way that usually there were no, here's a reporter and here's a private detective. So that, I thought that was really interesting, and I liked that. And the backgrounds of my character, at least in particular, there was a lot of stuff in there that I usually don't see that kind of, I think, background laid out for pre-gen. It was a little challenging. So, okay, there's a lot of big words in here, and there's some like big descriptions of the things this person does. I'm going to have to go look some of this up so that I know it. I'm going to have to go a very diverse group of pre-gens as well. We had a really good conversation ahead of, okay, we're going to try and do accents here. We're not going to, and for different reasons. And it was appropriate to have that conversation because these characters span the area. So yeah, overall, very positive opinion of this as a very fun sort of capsule adventure to run.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I think that there's a lot of scenarios that can benefit, and campaigns that can benefit too, from a little bit of confinement. I think that plays an interesting role in how player characters react. So I'll just go in introduction order then to Rosie and just get your impressions of the scenario and sort of where you sat.
Well, I believe I wrote down her seat. I was in seat 2B in first class. And I really enjoyed the solitude of the scenario and the way that we were already, like, you get on a plane, you know that it's you and these 100 or so people for the next 8 hours. That's already pretty insular. And then some of those people go away. And then it gets even smaller. Like, it keeps sort of going down. And I really enjoyed that because it added a sort of intensifying of a situation, which was then furthered by the actual crushing of the plane. So that was a thing, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I totally agree with Nate. It's a really fun scenario that would be a good palate cleanser. So yeah, there's dark moments, but if you've just come off a really harsh Delta Green mission, I think this would be perfect.
I don't know any Delta Green missions that are harsh. Just who would run those? Um, so no, an excellent observation, right? So I do think that there is a space inside of the repository community where palette cleansers are really good because there are more long form campaigns being played, and so that's a very salient point. So good to hear. Okay, Tom, or the Tall Tom, as you're known, give me your impressions if you would.
Yeah, I love a good one-shot single session, similar to what's been said about like palette cleansers. I know some people put a lot of effort in kind of weaving all the 1920s scenarios together, but actually, yeah, if I'm not playing a campaign, then I want like a bam, done in a night, unique experience, and this definitely was that. And I really enjoyed uh, disliking and sending up my character. I thought he was really fun. And Dreamlands is one of my favorite things about Lovecraft and Call of Cthulhu. Like, definitely shouldn't be overdone. But as soon as I saw that in the character background, I went, oh, great. This is going to be riffing on a load of stuff that really lands with me. So I like that element of it. Yeah, and as everybody's already mentioned, the kind of bottle episode of really being locked in a space. And it adds a lot of pressure and means that I don't think we were ever going, oh, we've stuck with too many options about all the different places we could go. Like, we're on a plane. What are we going to do?
Yeah, plane travel does that. Encapsulation does sort of add a ton of different flavor depending upon what the situation is, and then obviously the character as they change throughout the story. You get to decide what happens next, right? Who goes for the panic bar first? I love it. Okay, Newman, give me your impressions if you would.
Well, going last out of these guys is a rum deal. But yeah, I think I'd echo what everybody said. But I think that there is a reality that, well, nice. Tall Tom's already commented on it, but the idea of, you know, you're getting a background. Nate talked about as well, that kind of expanded backgrounds that you get with these characters. I'd be quite proud handing that out if it was my scenario, that there is that really detailed, you know, this is them, this is their family, this is where they're going, this is their job, their interactions. But also, I don't know whether everybody did with it because they just didn't get a chance to do it. But my pre-gen, and I know Nate's did as well because of what we did, had a spell. It's very rare that you start the game going, you've got a spell, but it was set up quite nicely. It was mine was this idea of, you don't really know where this has come from because it's Dreamlands, but you've picked it up along the way. So there was a nice ambiguity to it that you could play as well, which was quite cool. I do think as a sanity grinder, I love the environment stuff, and I'll talk about that later if I get the opportunity. The environmental aspect of the plane, but with the sanity grinder thing, it's a brilliant bridging scenario. But I'd also be a bit concerned that if it was a bridging scenario and I grinded all of the sanity out of all my players and then went, right, now let's start that campaign that we're using this as a bridging gap for. Oh, you're all insane. Oh, my bad. But I think as a one shot, yeah, everyone's talking about that palette cleanser. It's really cool. It's a really nice thing. It's got a great atmosphere. It's got a really lovely vibe to it as well. And a few unexpected twists, I think, which is great.
Unexpected twists are nice. Okay, so I'm going to dive back towards Nate and ask him sort of a double-sided question. Give me something in this scenario that stuck out as something unexpected and positive. And if you have one, not that you're required, but if you have one, is there a critique that you would give that the scenario needs to consider or the writer needs to consider for better playability?
Spoiler, how spoilery? Full spoilers?
We can be completely. It's a review, so
yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll just key in right here, very special noise, this noise, and we'll let everybody know that there's going to be spoilers from this point forward. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I did give the whole plot at the beginning, so I feel like if you've made it this far,
surprise!
It's okay.
There's a couple things that introduce some of the main plot points, the main surprises, and I really liked them because it was, hey, you woke up, you're not sure what happens, and the clues are things are happening physically, but it doesn't make any sense why. And it did the thing that I really love in a one shot in a scenario where it's obvious but unexpected. So when it happens, I think all of us said, oh, this is what's going on. That's really cool. But it wasn't, you weren't really led to that is going to be what it is, and that's what's happened. And so it was very nice and very fun, and that ramped up. And so it was very, maybe a little subtle in the beginning, and then it was more obvious, and then it was just like, oh, just hitting over the head obvious of what was going on. But I really liked that mechanic that was going on, that little dynamic that was going on. So that's one small, there's a lot of really good stuff in the scenario, but I'll pick that as one small thing. My suggestion, this is a sanity grinder. My suggestion is you're locked in an airplane and now you're going through indefinite insanity or bouts or this or that. A custom, here's some sanity bout situations for this situation for these characters would be very, very welcome, I think, for the character side, from the keeper side, especially since this is a Dreamland scenario. So here's your custom D10 to roll, and you have Dreamland's sort of specific maybe bout situations or conditions that you could play with, and you could also temper that or tailor that to the fact that you're locked in an airplane. There was one point I'm like, I have murderous rage after this character, but that's not going to be fun to do that for 2 hours because we're in a freaking airplane. There's nowhere to hide. So let's do something else. So I think that would be the one thing I would love to see added, especially because the sanity loss is very deliberate, very definite. There's no accident here. The author really wants this to be, you're getting ground down.
Okay.
Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. So a custom table specific to the scenario that says you could use this out of the Keeper's Rulebook, or if you'd like, you could use this to sort of prolong things or maybe give someone some different things to work with. That's a good suggestion. Okay, Rosie, same question to you. Something that you definitely enjoyed about the scenario, and then if there's a critique or perhaps some creative inspiration you've gotten from it, you could suggest to the writer.
I really enjoyed several of the things that Nate brought up, and Miranda was fantastic at describing these very mundane things that, because we couldn't see their actors, were terrifying, but they were presented at moments where they sort of snapped our characters back into, oh, so we're adjacent to what's happening. We just can't really interact with it. And then there were other lovely moments where one of us managed to sort of re-enter that adjacency through a moment, and that was really well done and terrifying. I adored it. So I enjoyed the descriptions and the way that was sort of woven in to the movement of the scenario, because it did propel us forward really nicely. We had a lot of fun character interaction in the beginning, but we needed those moments to move our characters, because otherwise we would have been really lost. And this character was very well put together. Her stats made a lot of sense for who she is, and the character art was helpful. There's lovely character art. There's a great write-up that if I was new to Call of Cthulhu would have been super helpful, because I would have looked at it and gone, well, what the heck do I do with all these numbers? But this was very helpful.
Right. Yeah, okay. All right. Back in the the amongst the redwoods, Tall Tom, give us your positive and or critique of what you saw and experienced in the scenario.
I think the escalation of weird, without them necessarily being threats, but like stewardess disappears, some people are missing, corpses floating around, tentacle monster. Like there's a nice kind of, there's always something new happening, but it's not like, oh, this thing is about to rip our head off right now. It's kind of just adding to the weirdness and the tension. So I enjoyed that. There was definitely no moment of going, we've got nothing to follow up on, we don't know what to do, because kind of bangs, as they're sometimes called, but things are coming to us to keep things lively. I don't think I had a lot of down points. I mean, maybe more cats would have been great. I suppose this is really nitpicky. So I was delighted as soon as I saw on my character description, has regularly visited the Dreamlands. It's interesting, in a game where the lore is as vast as Call of Cthulhu, some players may never have visited the Dreamlands or know what that is. So I did just wonder, for some of the groups I run, that would be great. For some of the other groups, I go, oh, I think I would have to prepare an additional handout for that person to bring them up to speed. But I think that's all I've got, really.
More than enough. I especially like the idea of you bringing and saying, oh, the stewardess appears and this weird thing happens and there are tentacles. That's nice. Like, I love that that was a positive for you. So it sounds like you certainly had a good time. Okay, so Newman, bring us home then in that regard. Tell us your couple of things that were something positive, perhaps, and something that the writer could creatively work on.
Yeah. So lots of echoing here. There's loads of really great stuff, and I think Miranda really played it really well as a keeper to kind of deliver what was in the scenario. That whole like uncanny valley thing with the whole we're on a plane. Hopefully, we all, a lot of people have been on a plane. We know the experience, we know the environment. So when weird things start to happen, when they feel out of place, strange enough for us to go, that's not right. That was all done really well. And Tom talked about that, but I think Miranda did a great job of communicating that to us collectively as a group, because we weren't always together as well on the plane. So that was really, really cool. I think maybe for the writer, and I don't know whether this is just my own personal likes and wants and wishes and things. We got this outstanding kind of background, and as Rosie said, we've got great pictures. There's a real sense of who your character is. Mine talks about having, like, I've got a Japanese wife, couple of kids, lots of detail on my job and stuff. I was kind of, I don't know. I almost thought those things would be used against me as like mythos dreamland like visions, weapons, things that I'd be seeing, and I feel like if the author has gone to the length that they've gone to create this brilliant, and it really is superb, I'd be really proud to get to hand this out in one of my scenarios. But if they've gone to the length to create something like this, and their pre-gens tie it into the scenario, even if they're optional blocks saying, if you're using the pre-gens, here is a fantastic way to freak out Michael Pravin when he sees his daughters running down the aisle, or he hears his wife calling to him from the locked lavatory cubicle. and like the whole dreamland nightmarish aspect starts to seep in, would have been like, I'd been like, okay, that's next level. Because they've just done so much work, it feels like that would be a nice little step for them to take.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree completely. I think that if you're handed a pregen and that pregen has kids, there's a high likelihood that there's going to be some sort of interaction that involves those kids, because why put them on the character sheet? So maybe that's something constructively that would be good to consider a little bit, is looking a little deeper into this sort of massive amount of detail that's been put in to make sure that, hey, please use this stuff. Actually, you could totally create another table if you needed to, and take little bits from everybody's character, put them on that table, and say, all right, there's a group of people having a bout here. This person sees this person. Oh, I saw these two kids run through here. I don't have any kids, but they do. Wait, what do they look like? Yeah, you could do a ton of stuff with that. Okay, great. So Keeper, as it is, Keeper Miranda.
My retort.
No. Overruled. What are your impressions of the scenario as running?
I really like it. I was nervous to run it, so I did a test run with another group before I stepped up to the plate with this group. So but I don't run a lot of Call of Cthulhu. I mean, I know I say that I don't know the rules, so it makes me nervous to run new things. And I tried when running this, like, I wanted it to showcase the scenario, so I ran it as written as much as possible. I think it's really fun. I love the sanity grinder mechanics, and it doesn't say in there that it is a sanity grinder, but it's like anytime they're interacting with something that the waking world is also interacting with or pushing back on, then that's a sand check. And it's just like little chips of sanity going away, one or two at a time. But if a cart's being, like, think of how many times on an airplane someone's opening the overhead bin or pushing the call button or opening the window or pushing a cart. It's a lot. And so we kind of did a lot with that. I do agree the pre-gens are super fun, and I loved that you guys used a couple of the spells, because my other group didn't do that. And so, like, your creative thinking, that kind of saved your sanity. Nate kind of saved your sanity a little bit by dismissing the jellyfish creature for a little bit. So that was really cool. They have a lot of fun things that you can do. The characters have a lot of fun bits about them, and it's a good short scenario, because the first group I ran it with, we did it in 2 hours, and it didn't feel like we missed anything. It felt like a complete run. I knew this group would be more talkative, and we ran it in 3 hours. So, like, that's still like a very solid for a talkative group. Running something in 3 hours and being able to, like, push things forward to get to that I think that's a nice thing to have, these shorter scenarios that you can fit in. So
yeah, okay,
those are my pluses.
One quick reply here. Is it something you could see being run at a convention because it fits into a smaller time frame?
Absolutely. This would be I think an easy con run.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so any constructive pieces?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I had some thoughts. I think it's really well written. It gives you a lot of options of different things to do with the characters. I did have a constructive thing. I'm just trying to think of what it. Oh, now I remember what it is. Okay, so both of the things that like, the end of the scenario is kind of finding this little girl and figuring out what to do with her, and there's, like, not a lot of things on the plane. Her book is out, and I mean, the first thing investigators are going to do is search the fucking plane. So both times, I just kind of, like, let them search and not treat it as a search roll, and kind of let them. I mean, they're panicking a little bit because things are weird, so I treat it behind the scenes as not being a thorough search roll. I'm sure they could have found the little girl and then had more random shit happen, but I feel like them finding her is the end point. That's what pushes you towards the end. That gives you the book that pretty much has the story laid out of why this thing is. and the first thing that they're going to do is search, and this thing is out, and she's hiding in a bathroom, and like Rosie was like, I want to start opening all the doors. So, but luckily her lavatory was locked, and Rosie didn't, press further on that. And so, it's hard. I feel like I'm hiding information from investigators, which is a totally normal thing as a keeper. Who cares? But that's the first thing. And I would hate for players to feel tricked by saying, we searched this whole fucking plane, and now 3 hours later, you're saying, here's a book on this chair that we didn't see when we searched the plane. And that's really my biggest thing, is that I felt like I had to hide some information from the players. That they maybe would have naturally stumbled upon, or I would have naturally given them. But
yeah,
that's relatively small, because as a keeper, I can hide whatever the fuck I want.
You certainly
I can hide whatever I want.
Whatever you'd like. Yeah, I think it's a fair observational point, if nothing else, to let anybody picking up the scenario know, hey, you're going to have to take a look at how this, especially Act 3, comes together, and how you want that to unfurl. So that's good information, even if it's something that you naturally had to massage a little bit or move in a different direction. It's a good call out, so that way people listening or watching the review can say, oh, okay, this sounds like a really fun scenario. I'm gonna have to get into it and figure out, what do I do about this Act 3 part.
Yeah. And there were some questions that came up. So the spells obviously are in the Keeper's rulebook. So I had the Keeper's rulebook up, and then they were doing spells in combat with the monster that's in the Malus Monstorum. So then I had to have that up too. So those are also a couple of pieces that someone keeping it might want to have handy if your players are going to try to cast a spell against the Guardian of the Crystallizer of Dreams.
Certainly. Okay. Anyone have any final sort of thoughts to share, or do you feel like we've covered it? Good. Okay. So, Rosie and then Newman.
Okay. Hi. I think that the spells, if you're a new keeper and you're running this, you could totally just strike those last lines and say, so I know there's spells on these character backgrounds, but we use them because we're experienced players. This is something that can be run without those spells and can just be completed with good character interaction and other roles. So if you don't have those handbooks, if you're just picking it up and you say, I want to do this, but I don't want to deal with the magic, I find it intimidating as a keeper, you can run it without those things. It's just spicy and I like it.
Nice. Okay. Newman?
I was going to ask a question actually of Rosie and Tom. Do you guys, in your character background, did you guys have spells?
I did.
Yeah.
I can make my face look like other people.
Is that you, Rosie, or Sylvie? Is that like...
Sylvie can look like other people. As mentioned, she studied with a esoteric acting group, and she has the body warping of Gorgoroth, and it does have the page number in the Keeper's Guide, which I thought was very helpful. But I did not think it necessary to use.
Most drama schools, you don't get to learn that until the 3rd year, so that's impressive. I had, what did I have? Words of Power, which I have to say, maybe this is a slight minus for me. Words of Power involves you talking to a group of people for 10 minutes in order to convince them of something. So I did a little bit feel like, oh, wow, we're not playing Pulp, but I'm playing a character that from the get-go has a spell that's amazing. And then, oh, I'm on a plane. Most of the people have disappeared now. I guess I'm not going to be using this much.
Yeah, I think it would be very, very difficult to, at least with any of the plane flights I've been on, to have one person stand up and orate for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, without being told to sit down.
there. And while I've got you, can I talk to you about my book?
Right.
I mean,
It's a pre-recorded video.
I think you're underselling yourself, Tom, because I think even without doing the spell, you did that at least twice within our game run, and it was
always
wonderful.
be upselling.
Well, the reason I asked was because Nate's spell was used. I think Nate used it brilliantly, and it was really effective. And I know, Miranda, you kind of went, do you know what? I think the spell works like this, and I know it might not be used like this, but it's for great narrative. We're going to roll with it. And it was a really nice storytelling moment. And then later on, when I was able to use my spell on the little girl rather than, because I figured my spell was, I figured that the author probably gave me my spell, which was Cloud Memory, to potentially use on one of the other players because of potential actions that could have happened. Then you could have kind of gone, you don't remember that I've just stolen your crystal or wallet or Jedi mind trick or whatever. It was very much I figured that was the way it was going to be used, so using it differently. But again, Miranda, you as the keeper, you brilliantly just kind of rolled with both of those spells. But I felt like those spells worked really well in this scenario, and that's why I was curious as to what were the other two.
And I get the feeling that they were written for the character based on the character background. I mean, your characters are experienced dreamers. You all have like 10 at least in Cthulhu Mythos. You're all experienced dreamers. So I feel like the spells that you were given were really to solidify that background rather than spells that would specifically be useful in this scenario. So like one of the other, someone says has Chant of Thoth. Yeah, that's one. There's one of them has a, because there's other NPCs, has mental suggestion. So there are some use, but yeah, I felt like they kind of like had that rounding out effect of the character, that each one of you have this spell and they're fun to use, but not necessarily specifically made for the scenario.
I think that's a really good point, and that now that you mention it, that is exactly how I took it when I read her background. It's like, oh, she knows things. Cool.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it was a ton of fun. And hopefully if you've listened to the AP of it and then come here for the review, you'll get interested in We Dream of Flying by Jim Phillips. So I want to thank the cast and the keeper for entertaining you. And we hope to see you in the next review very soon.